Well, your SEO is bigger than 1,000 keywords, and BigQuery is where the real story begins. As I said, you have got experts around you, AI. BigQuery opened the doors to way more insights than just Google Search Consoles, Google Sheets, and GA4. So upskill yourself, share what you learn, and let AI help you turn that data into action. Hello, this is Priya Verma, and this is SEO in 2026.
Priya, what's your number one SEO tip for 2026?
So my top tip for SEO in 2026 is to gear up your SEO analysis through Google BigQuery.
Okay, so why BigQuery in particular?
SEO analysis in BigQuery is powerful because it lets you move beyond the already existing SEO tools like Google Search Console, Ahrefs, etc., their own limitations, and kind of see the full picture at scale. So by analyzing millions of queries alongside other data, you just uncover deeper patterns, user behavior insights, and real opportunities to actually grow your traffic. And why we are majorly focusing on BigQuery is because of the set limitation of the most widely used tool for SEO, which is Google Search Console. So in Google Search Console, you could only look at top 1,000 keywords. And I'm sure for big businesses, this doesn't give a real full picture. So then that's where the tools like BigQuery comes in. And there are definitely other alternatives like Google Sheets plugin, where you could actually import 25,000 rows. But again, as I said, if you are a big industry with hundreds and thousands of keywords, there is still a huge limitation. So that's where the bulk export comes in. So by connecting your Google Search Console to BigQuery through the BigQuery API and BigQuery Storage API, you can actually capture and store all your data at scale without actually hitting those row limits. And this is where it really gets interesting as well, because the retention policy in Google Search Console is 16 months. So after 16 months, the data get lost. But in BigQuery, you could keep it as long as you want. You could customize the retention period and your data remains for more than 16 months. And then when you take those insights that you unlock from a Google Search Console or other offline data sets in BigQuery and combine that with your analytics data, which is, for example, GA4, suddenly you're not just looking at what people are searching for, but how they behave when they land on your site. So you can connect the dot between search demands, journeys, conversions, and it just makes the game more interesting.
Yes, I was going to ask you about the retention of data as well, because obviously if you only keep your data for 16 months, then that's a big downside, certainly when you're comparing historical data. Do you think that not enough SEOs know about that?
Yes, you're right. Actually, they don't. They think of BigQuery as a database where you kind of store your data, which is true. But when you talk about analysis of your historical data set, that's where it all changes. And that's where when you go to your legal, they will ask you questions about retention. They will ask you questions about what are you storing. And that's a very crucial point, because if in my companies, if my SEOs are actually analyzing the data for last 12 months, or let's say last 2 years, you need to have that. And it's just kind of spreading that knowledge around to say, this is something that could be changed in BigQuery, and not just for SEO, but even for analytics, let's say for GA4. So yeah, that the spreading that awareness is really, really important.
And you've mentioned GA4, you've mentioned Search Console there as well. Is there certain ways that you can manipulate the data within BigQuery that you can't really do natively?
Yes. So what happens in BigQuery, as I said, the BigQuery contains all your data in a tabular format. So there is like a table of all of the data from GA4 or Google Search Console, for example. In Google Search Console, you will have all your rows in it, like for clicks, keywords, site URLs, impressions. But now you could also create calculated columns or calculated metrics and look at those numbers, not just absolute, but as a percentage as well. Same goes for GA4. So you could actually create your own logics and your own metrics in BigQuery. While that is possible in UI, at least in GA4, but BigQuery gives you more flexibility because you get access to data at a hit level. So you don't have to work at a session level or at a, like a user level. So you could still use SQL. So that's where SQL comes into picture, because that's the thing where you have to learn SQL to kind of being able to give a good prompt or, an appropriate logic. And you combine Google Search Console data with GA4, there has to be an identifier to kind of connect these data sets, and it kind of changes the entire game.
So, and I guess you would also advise SEOs to start importing their data to BigQuery just as soon as possible, even if they don't actually intend to actively use BigQuery. At least the data is getting saved, and then they can use it in the future.
Exactly. That's a very good point that you raised. I would say it has a disadvantage because as and when you connect BigQuery, the data doesn't get available in BigQuery retrospectively. So it only gets available for, let's say, past 2 days. So just make sure you connect it ASAP. Like you said, even if you don't use it, just store it, because it would definitely help you if your team is now equipped with languages that they need to learn in order to work in BigQuery. At least you have the data to work on, right? And not regret later.
And are there any best practice ways to make sure that you're connected properly, getting all the data that you require from GA4 and Search Console?
There is a whole lot of documents by Google, very well provided, on how you could do those connections. So you have to just follow step by step and make the connection. For Google Search Console, the connection is not very direct. Like in the UI, you just don't have BigQuery and you go and connect the project. It doesn't work like that. That's where you need to use BigQuery API, and then you just need to have a little bit of technical knowledge to be able to do that. And in the businesses that I have seen, it's not the SEO team who does it. It's the service desk team, or an implementation team who has a bit of technical background to be able to make that connection. So I don't think that's going to be a very big challenge. In GA4, the connection is kind of readily available once you have a project created in BigQuery. So even that is very easy.
How do you go about blending Search Console and GA4 data in BigQuery? Because obviously it's two different types of data. So how do you make sure that you can actually utilize these two sources of data together to actually tell us a joined up story?
So there is, I have been asked, in the beginning when I actually was kind of looking at some of the data for SEO, and I was being asked this question as to why my SEO clicks or the Google Search Console clicks are not matching to that of sessions in GA4. So we need to understand that these both tools are very different to each other. While GA4 works on sessions, user, and events, Google Search Console works on clicks, impressions, and positions. So Google Search Console gives the data based on impressions of the results that a user sees on Google search results. Once the user click that link and land on your website, that's where Google Analytics comes into picture, and that starts your sessions. So that's where you get your sessions. So those metrics are different. So then if you look at comparing the metric, session and clicks would more or less match with each other. If there is a difference, which is nominal, like by few numbers, that's okay. You can ignore it. There would be those differences because of how the tool is built. If the differences is large, then that's where you need to look at your analytics or SEO configuration that you're doing. It could be because of the cookie wall, where GA4 analytics is even not capturing data when you're not consented. Few of the landing pages are missing tags. That's where the differences would come in. The time zone could be different in Google Analytics and Google Search Console. In Google Search Console, you can't even change the time zone, so it's very set up and fixed. Attribution. Google Search Console doesn't use any attribution. It just collects your organic search, Google organic search data, as and when the user click it. So it's like all event level. But GA4 uses attribution, 3 types of attribution: last touch, direct last touch, data driven, and that could even affect your numbers. So going back to the basics and trying to understand those differences before we try to blend the data. So in order to blend that data, when I say blend that data, it doesn't mean that we connect the Google Search Console data to Google Analytics and find out the entire, bits by bits. When I say blend the data, it means look at your organic, because we are talking about SEO here. So of course, other channels doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you talk about just SEO, make sure that whatever channels you're looking in GA4 is based on the attribution models. So we need to find the dimensions that you're looking in GA4 to be able to match those numbers. So these are like some of the bits and pieces that you want to keep in mind before drilling further into your journeys on the website.
Brilliant. Is it worthwhile exploring other sources of data as well in order to assist you actually build that more holistic picture of what's happening with your digital marketing activities? So I'm thinking you can obviously connect Google Sheets, but you can also connect YouTube and perhaps Google Ads as well.
Yes, why not? Yes, you can connect those data as well. But it depends from business to business needs. Most businesses just want to look at their SEO performance. And on top, they want to have Google Analytics for so they could understand the behavioral performance on the website. While other use, if you're using social media as account and you're posting your, the content on YouTube, etc., that also is coming from a different channel, right? Which doesn't necessarily will be organic, but paid. So that performance analysis is going to be different. So I think there is a decision that needs to be made, which sources can be combined and which cannot. Talking about offline data as well. So if you're getting conversions through offline data, even that can go into BigQuery. But we need to decide which sources to combine, really.
Understood. Okay. And once you get all this data loading in there, obviously you need to spend time interpreting the data and perhaps diving into it on a regular basis. So how do you best use BigQuery on a regular basis to provide real great business insight and to be able to share that with other stakeholders in a business?
Yeah, so let's start with prerequisite that you need is definitely SQL. And most of this data analysis part lies with a team like data engineering or data analysis who knows SQL. So first we need to, approach it in parts that you pick one section of SQL, learn it, move to the other section, and then merge them together. So like exercise them and then get into BigQuery. So the technical SEO section part of the entire SEO umbrella would know that, but the other bits of marketing pieces might not know fully. So if you want to analyze data in BigQuery rather than having too much dependency on other team, just learn SQL because you got AI with you, right? What best could you accept in BigQuery? I mean, recently I was in a conference and Google has just made the whole BigQuery game more smarter because they have introduced an AI engine search in Google BigQuery where you could actually use AI to make queries for you in simple terms. So you give like instructions to that AI and it would give you SQL queries. And you can even ask the AI to kind of give you graphs or other bits with your data. So while you just have to learn the basic SQL and then, like go about it. You get faster insights, less manual work, and get scale with your data. And you don't have to be dependent on any team. So these are like really, really important prerequisites if you want to actually remove the dependency. I myself have started using BigQuery a year ago and running SQL. I didn't know SQL myself, but I learned it and did it. So it kind of is very interesting to what extent you could do this.
And if an SEO hasn't used BigQuery before, is quite uncomfortable with it, would you suggest just using AI? Because you mentioned AI a few times there as well. Can they use AI just to simply walk them through the setting up of everything? Or is it best actually to reach out to some BigQuery professional to begin with to get everything set up properly?
Yeah, so I think I am the right person to tell you that because I myself haven't used BigQuery and I was always interested. But of course, in different industries come different constraints, right? So when I am in compare the market, so we have BigQuery, of course, and I have never worked at BigQuery. I know SQL, but just not the structure. And every company has a different structure in of BigQuery as well. And where the BigQuery ownership lies always remains a question in every business, right? Whether me as an engineer needs to run it, whether machine learning needs to run it, etc. What I would suggest is to first get in touch with an expert who has set the BigQuery. Even if you're not technical, I'm sure there are great people and experienced people in the organization who can explain you in very simple terms. And there were people in my organization who have explained me in very simple terms, and then understand the entire setup and understand the entire workflow of BigQuery for your organization. And then you dive into learning it by yourself. So I learned SQL at a very basic level, but then I used AI. I used AI to give me queries at a deeper level. So I want to do like join by, I want to do group by. These are like basic things, but I myself struggle. So I just used AI to give me that. And that's the tricky part, because you have to give a proper prompt to the AI to be able to give you the thing you want. You just can't like really copy paste. And that's where I said a basic SQL knowledge is required. So reach out to an expert and then dive in by yourself and maintain consistency, right? It's not like use for a week and then forget about it and then come back to it. It will not like really make sense. It's more like your health. You have to go to the gym every day to be able to tone your body. So it kind of is like that. So I keep practicing and it gets better.
Priya, what's the key takeaway from the tip you shared today?
Well, your SEO is bigger than 1,000 keywords, and BigQuery is where the real story begins. As I said, you have got experts around you, AI. BigQuery opened the doors to way more insights than just Google Search Consoles, Google Sheets, and GA4. So upskill yourself, share what you learn, and let AI help you turn that data into action.
Priya Verma is Senior Digital Analytics Implementation Engineer at Compare the Market. Find out more over at comparethemarket.com. Priya, thanks so much for being part of SEO in 2026.
Thank you, David.
I've been your host, David Bain. Get your copy of SEO in 2026, the book, over at SEOin2026.com.